Modern writers have many story structure options: the 3-act structure, the Fichtean curve, and the Save the Cat, for example. However, today's focus is on the monomyth, also known as the hero's journey. Every culture has stories of heroes. Some of our most beloved stories are of heroes. In fact, history's oldest, widely known fictional story is probably the adventure-packed mythic poem of the demigod Sumerian king Gilgamesh, as detailed in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The written version of this story is about 4,000 years old, depending on who you ask. Many have tried to quantify what we now refer to as the hero's journey. But regardless of the identity of the who is analyzing, the ingredients of the what are always the same. The distillation is, the hero embarks on an adventure for a specific reason. Along the way, he overcomes obstacles and challenges. Eventually, he's altered because of his trials. And finally, he returns to where he began, wholly transformed. That's the distillation. For more details, keep watching. Writers use a host of story structures to help them weave tales that are exciting, compelling, horrible, thought-provoking, and much more. Popular story structures include some of the following. Freytag's Pyramid. Freytag's Pyramid was created by Gustav Freytag in 1863 and is characterized by a story broken into two halves consisting of a first-half play and a second-half counterplay. The two parts are hinged with a climax in the middle to form the pyramid shape. It contains 5 dramatic elements: introduction, rising movement, climax, falling movement, and denouement. Use this story structure to invoke empathy with the reader and tell downbeat stories about flawed protagonists. This structure was purpose-built to author tragedies. Examples include William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet in 1597 and Netflix's The Ballad of Buster Scruggs in 2018. The 3-act structure. The 3-act structure is sometimes credited to Aristotle, even though his desired model was a 2-act structure with a connecting turning point called a peripeteia. To me, Aristotle's model seems more closely aligned with Freytag's pyramid rather than the 3-act structure. This structure was popularized by Sid Field in 1979 and is characterized by 3 acts, respectively consisting of the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. Unlike Freytag's pyramid, the climax occurs at the end rather than in the middle. Use this story structure when each scene needs to have a clear objective and the entire story needs to have a definitive beginning, middle, and end. Examples include Jurassic Park in 1990 and Julia Roberts' Pretty Woman in 1990. The Dan Harmon Story Circle. The Dan Harmon Story Circle was developed in the 1990s by its namesake, Dan Harmon. It's a simplified interpretation of the original 17-step monomyth popularized by Joseph Campbell. Use this story structure when you want to follow a simpler model than Christopher Vogler's or Joseph Campbell's versions of the hero's journey. It's formulaic and predictable, but it allows the writer to pace the action and stay on track with what needs to come next. It differs from the hero's journey in that its focus is more on the character rather than the journey itself. However, the Harmon Circle and the hero's journey both result in a transformed protagonist. Examples include Liam Neeson's Taken in 2008 and AMC's Breaking Bad in 2008. Save the Cat. Save the Cat was created by Blake Snyder in 2005. It's characterized by its formulaic, templatized approach and its gimmick of attempting to win favor with the audience by having the hero do something likable in the very beginning, like saving a cat. It also includes a 15-step ordered list called the beat sheet that details the order in which story elements appear, as well as the number of pages each element should take for a standard 110-page screenplay. Use this story structure when you need a fill-in-the-blank framework to deliver a predictable writing outcome, and also when you want to endear the protagonist to the reader from the very beginning. An iconic Save the Cat moment is in 2004's Hellboy, where the protagonist literally saves a box of kittens. There's a companion, more subtle device called Pet the Dog, whereby the protagonist also does something admirable. However, instead of taking place at the beginning, like the Save the Cat does, it takes place at the midpoint in close proximity to James Scott Bell's mirror moment, which is the character's point of self-reflection. I guess if you wanted to disendear the protagonist from the very beginning, you could have an antithetical kill the cat moment whereby the protagonist does something despicable. Examples of Save the Cat are Marvel's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse in 2018 and Ingrid Bergman's Gaslight in 1944. The 7-point structure. The 7-point structure was first described by Dan Wells in 2013 and is based on the Star Trek role-playing game Narrator's Guide. It contains all of the familiar steps seen in most stories and many other writing structures. However, it differs in its execution. It's characterized by the writer deciding on and planning first the resolution, then the beginning and hook, and finally working their way through the middle. Use this story structure when you have a clear ending or outcome in mind, but you don't know how to get there, but the characters and world you have in mind are compelling. This structure gives the writer a mechanism to create flexible plot points between the ends that can be ultimately connected to weave a cohesive narrative. Examples include Sylvester Stallone's Rocky in 1976 and James Cameron's Titanic in 1997. The Fichtean Curve. The Fichtean Curve was described in John Gardner's The Art of Fiction in 1991. The Fichtean Curve is named for German philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte. Although online I see people pronouncing it Fichtean or Fichtean, because its namesake is German, I believe the correct pronunciation is Fichtean. To further support this assertion, it's sometimes referred to as the dorsal fin of whatever the author is talking about. And what has a dorsal fin? Fish. Fish have dorsal fins. Anywho, moving along. Gardner expanded on work by Johann Christoph Friedrich von Schiller, and yes, another Johann, and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The Fichtean Curve is characterized by continually escalating catastrophes and triumphs that pile upon themselves. The momentum is quickly built and consistently maintained. It's one thing after another. Use this story structure when the action needs to start immediately and little is known about the protagonist, situation, or objective. Examples include L. Frank Baum's The Wizard of Oz in 1900 and Bruce Willis's Die Hard in 1988. Understanding the monomyth and the hero's journey. People have probably attempted to understand various elements of the monomyth since before writing was even invented. Since it's somewhat esoteric in nature, it's normal and even expected that the details of the monomyth will be slightly different for different people, and even the same person, depending on the circumstances of when they are evaluating it. And although it was most recently popularized by Joseph Campbell in 1949, many others have also attempted to quantify it. Max Müller wrote an influential Oxford essay on the subject called Comparative Mythology in 1856. This essay, in tandem with his popular Science of Language lecture series, kept the hero's journey discussion in favor. Sir Edward Burnett Tylor penned a somewhat scandalous book called Primitive Culture, Researches into the Development of Mythology, Philosophy, Religion, Language, Art, and Custom in 1871. This book was partially a counter to Müller's work, as they had somewhat opposing views on the very phenomena. And the reason it was scandalous at the time was because it definitively stated and provided scientific evidence to support the notion that so-called primitive people were not inferior to white Europeans. Go figure. Johann Georg von Hahn authored Sachwissenschaftliche Studien, also known as Fairy Tale Studies, in 1876. In it, he summarized the commonalities he'd identified in the translations he made of select Greek and Albanian fairy tales. Alfred Nutt noted common and recurring elements from his research of the Celts in his The Aryan Expulsion and Return formula in the Folk and Hero Tales of the Celts in 1881. 2 decades later, he published The Fairy Mythology of Shakespeare in 1900. Sir James George Frazer penned The Golden Bough, a study in magic and religion in 1890. The Golden Bough catalogs similarities between the mythic beliefs of cultures worldwide. Although somewhat outdated, it's still regarded by many as one of the great books of the 20th century. One reason for this is that Frazer was the first person on record to map out the mechanics of what has been dubbed magical thinking, which introduces the ingredients for the Greek sacred story mythos. Vladimir Propp identified 31 steps in the hero's journey. He delivered an analysis of Russian folktales in his Morphologia Skazy, or Morphology of the Folktale, in 1928. This work had significant influence in the mythological research arena. Dutch folklorist Johann de Vries seemed to be strongly influenced by Van Hahn in his Forschungsgeschichte der Mythologie, or Heroic Song and Heroic Legend, in 1961. In it, he recognized 10 universal elements in the hero's journey. Claude Lévi-Strauss was one of the staunch advocates and founding members of structuralism. Structuralism seeks to analyze isolated meanings and events in terms of their interrelationship with underlying structural laws. He conducted a comprehensive analysis of Native American myths, culminating with his Mythologique in 1971. In 1949, Joseph Campbell published The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Campbell based his work on that of German anthropologist Adolf Bastian, who asserted that myths worldwide appear to have been created using the same basic building blocks. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung labeled these basic building blocks archetypes. Jung believed these archetypes to be more than essential components of the unconscious mind. He believed they were part of a collective unconscious. In fact, Jung believed that everyone, everywhere, is born with the same inherent subconscious model of what a hero is, what a mentor is, what a quest is. And that's why people who don't come from the same culture, don't have the same values, and don't even speak the same language can enjoy and be equally impacted by the same stories. Although some assert that Bastian was first to propose the idea that myths from all over the world seem to be built from the same core group of ideas, keep in mind that this thought of a common universal motif for the hero's journey was not new thinking. In just the short list of scholars we've named here, several have asserted similar lines of thought. Max Müller, Sir Edward Burnett Tylor, and Johann Georg von Hahn, just to name a few. Joseph Campbell believed in the universal nature of mythic structure, but he also believed that it must be continually reinterpreted by each generation so that its essence was accurately conveyed to align with the understanding of the contemporary zeitgeist. This recontextualization would keep it relevant and add precision to its understanding. And Christopher Vogler does just that. Christopher Vogler created his condensed version of the hero's journey using Campbell's version as a model in 1992 when he penned The Writer's Journey, Mythic Structure for Storytellers and Screenwriters. As a storyteller and advisor, he's been on the creative teams of films such as Fight Club, The Wrestler, Aladdin, and The Lion King. Vogler's version omits some of the distinct steps found in Campbell's version, such as meeting with the goddess and apotheosis. And these omissions may be problematic depending on the type of story being written. But keep in mind that these models, although very similar, were created for very different purposes. Campbell's model was created to explore the psychic transformation of the hero as a stand-in for the collective conscious of humanity via the monomyth, while Vogler's version is simply a model for writers. While Campbell was a literature professor focused on comparative mythological research, Vogler was a screenwriter and author focused on storytelling. My preferred mashup of the hero's journey is mostly Vogler's structure, heavily saturated with Campbell's adornments. And I've taken some liberties with my version as well. Most notably, Campbell and Vogler both have 3 acts, and I've chosen 4 acts. However, these acts in the Hagerian version still align with the corresponding steps whereby acts 1 and 4 take place in the ordinary world, or the world of the known and the light, and acts 2 and 3 take place in the special world, or the world of the unknown and darkness. What is the hero's journey? The hero's journey is a universally applicable, common pattern and set of steps found in mythologies worldwide. In it, a reluctant individual, in an effort to achieve a goal, is led through a series of hardships that transforms them into a more capable version of themselves and also grants them a reward before they return to where they started. In fact, some of our best stories have return right in the title. The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Star Wars, Return of the Jedi. Bruce Lee, Return of the Dragon. Mark Morrison, Return of the Mac. What is the monomyth? Campbell coined the monomyth to mean the one, universal, singular myth. Note that for Campbell, a myth was not just some outdated story that people talked about but wasn't true. For Campbell, a myth was the psychological undercurrent of the collective psyche. It's what a comparative mythological examination would find that's common among all cultural myths, as opposed to what's different among them. So with this understanding, note that when I refer to the monomyth, I'm specifically talking about the collective human psychic experience. And when I refer to the hero's journey, I'm specifically talking about the storytelling journey. And because we're using Vogler's version, this discussion will be mostly focused on the hero's journey. What is the hero? The hero isn't a person. Instead, it's a manifestation of a Jungian archetype, with an archetype being a combined collection of unconscious, universal attributes and images with specific behavior patterns found in an individual's psyche. Think of it as a universal unconscious psychological prototype. If I had to map Jung's archetypes to Sigmund Freud's psychic apparatus, I'd say that archetypes existed in the id and to a lesser extent in the superego. And like Freud's psychic apparatus, Jung's archetypes would be pure psychology, with no direct correspondence to somatic structures in the brain. Also note that there's debate around whether Jungian archetypes actually exist, and the battle is real. These PubMed articles, for example, focus purely on the controversy surrounding the existence of, or lack thereof, of these archetypes. Personally, I believe there's something to be said for perhaps updating and revising some of what was originally developed by Jung, but aside from that, the concept has merit, and the foundation is solid. Because these elements are universal and unconscious, this means that a storyteller that is able to tap into the monomyth will have an instant connection with the reader or viewer. We instantly feel a connection to the hero, and we quickly become invested in the ordeal, as the hero is transformed into a surrogate for our own adventure. We become invested as the story unfolds on the page, the radio, or the screen, but there's also a story in our mind that's playing out, and eventually we are the hero in the book, on the airwaves, or in the movie, having the adventure. We've melded with the hero and are now a symbiotic protagonist. Vogler's version. To describe the hero's journey, we'll use Vogler's 12-step version. It fits rather neatly between the two other popular models of the hero's journey, which are Campbell's 17-step version and Harmon's 8-step version. Step 1. Ordinary world. Often, fantastic circumstances surrounding conception, birth, lineage, upbringing, and/or youth establish the hero's authenticity and can frequently become their own monomythic or hero's journey cycles. This is where normalcy is established. It provides the backdrop for the contrast to come in later steps. I would liken it to the 7-point structure's hook/introduction, or the 3-act structure's exposition. An example would be farm boy Luke Skywalker living his mundane existence on Tatooine, or Bilbo Baggins meandering lazily through life in the Shire. Our hero to be is average, or perhaps less than average, with little to no hint of greatness. He hasn't had a reason to be great, at least not yet. Any special skills or abilities will be unimportant and devalued in the normal world. But it will be the combination of these unimpressive talents that will carry weight in propelling the hero to greatness later in the story. Step 2. Call to adventure. The hero is called to adventure by some external event or messenger. The hero may accept the call willingly or reluctantly. Mythic heroes are nearly always lured into the enchanted wood by chasing a single animal, and the animal almost always escapes. The most well-known example of this today is probably the White Rabbit from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Alice follows the White Rabbit and ends up finding Wonderland. In The Nightmare Before Christmas, Jack follows Zero and finds Christmas Town. In The Matrix, Neo follows the White Rabbit tattoo to find Trinity. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, a robin leads the children to Mr. Beaver. And usually, because of everything that happens after heeding the call, the hero is simultaneously punished via the trials to come and rewarded via the prize received. Ultimately, there's an inciting incident that triggers a conflict and upsets the idea of normal for the hero that also creates a decision point. Step 3. Refusal of the call. In most of the memorable stories, the hero is most often reluctant to embark. Not always, but most of the time. It makes sense though. Anything that upsets normal is distasteful because even a bad normal is comfortable. But the unknown? Now that's scary. Additionally, there's a certain amount of pregnant tension that hangs in the air along with an unseen ticking clock when there's a pending decision that must be made. Whether a decision to leave is made willingly or unwillingly, making it is inevitable. It's important that the hero is seen as unsure, afraid, vulnerable, or unheroic at the start. And this weakness in the hero must be both physical weakness and emotional and spiritual weakness. We must question if they possess the physical durability as well as the internal grit to succeed. They must display having the raw materials at the start, but not display much in the way of a finished product. It would be counterproductive to have a hero-to-be that we know can already beat the boss-level bad guy from the very start. An example of this uncertainty about the hero is Luke Skywalker struggling with his training, whining about how hard learning the ways of the Force is, and walking out on Yoda, failing to lift the downed ship from the swamp. Here, the protagonist eventually overcoming his fear and overcoming his doubt are the very things that will make him a hero. Step 4. Meeting the mentor. Early in the journey, the hero will often receive assistance and guidance from a protective figure. Additionally, there's usually something extraordinary about this mentor, something esoteric, magical, or supernatural. The mentor will usually be an old man, old woman, wizard, scientist, or a person with special abilities and uncommon knowledge. They'll usually give the hero something to aid them on their journey: a potion, a sword, access card, guidebook, computer code, or special knowledge. Using supernatural tropes allows for greater flexibility in the storytelling and the explaining away of things that otherwise would not make sense in the real world. The mentor exists to groom the hero so that he accepts the journey and is fundamentally prepared to face the unknown. Gandalf is a mentor for the Fellowship of the Ring at large, but his impact on first Bilbo and then Frodo in their disparate adventures is a model example of the hero's journey mentor at work. The mentor is certainly crucial. However, some examples are not as elegant as that displayed in The Lord of the Rings. In the CBS Saturday morning version of Shazam from the 1970s, Billy Batson had the wise, older, white-haired mentor, and so as not to confuse anyone, his mentor's name was actually Mentor. Now, I'd like to think that the writers had simply the term mentor penned in as a placeholder, and for some reason, whether due to time constraints or oversight, they were unable to resolve it before airing. But it seems like an easy fix, though. And I'm probably wrong. I'm pretty sure I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it looks like it was just lazy writing. Yeah. Step 5. Crossing the threshold. Upon reaching the threshold of adventure, the hero must endure some kind of trial in order to cross the threshold that separates the everyday world from the world of adventure. This trial may be grand and blatant or gentle and subtle, but it must happen. There's a distinct transition from the world of light being the world of the known, to the world of dark, being the world of the unknown. This is the point of no return. There's no going back once this step is taken. Although there will be many changes to come with the hero, this is the first true change, and he will never be the same from this point of return going forward. For the hero and the reader, the old and familiar doesn't fundamentally exist anymore. This new world is now the real world, and the world he just came from is now the world of dreams and fantasy. Crossing the threshold also acts as a sort of one-way gateway or door that closes behind the hero, whereby they are thrust into a new, unknown, savage reality, and they must quickly learn to survive. A striking example of this stage is the iconic moment when the commandos and the professor cross the threshold of the newly activated portal in 1994's Stargate. It's a terrifying and wonderful step into the unknown for the travelers and the viewer. Step 6. Tests, allies, enemies. Once fully in the fantastic world of adventure, the hero is subjected to myriad tests. The tests may be natural, supernatural, intellectual, physical, psychological, or something completely foreign. The hero becomes more capable with each test, and the reader's confidence in him grows. The hero frequently has a companion or team with him during this stage. Sometimes the true hero has the role of supporting the character seen as the initial hero, but the initial hero fails, is exposed as an imposter, or is killed. This then allows our actual hero to transition into his role as the one truly authentic hero. Also, it's important to note that oftentimes enemies and obstacles are not clearly delineated. Friends may actually be enemies. Enemies may actually be friends, and some obstructions aren't just inanimate objects, but may also be within the ranks of the hero's allies. This is no different than a relative, friend, teammate, or ally of the hero who in actuality is a detractor, retardant, or subversive saboteur. For example, think of the buddy who invites his 1 year sober, alcoholic friend out to a bar to celebrate, or the parent with multiple unused vehicles who will not loan their worthy son or daughter the least expensive one so they can take the new job they've been offered and have reliable transportation, or the employee who purposefully underperforms at a critical time knowing it will severely impact their exceptional manager's standing in the company. You get the point. Step 7. Approach to the inmost cave. This is where the hero willingly steps into harm's way, and the way is fraught with danger. Here the setup is varied. There's nowhere to go on the path but forward, or the amulet needed for a critical step is held in the castle, or the team's super-duper computer hacker was taken by the bad guys, and they're being held in the high-tech office building, or the key that unlocks the map is somewhere in the hostile city with the monsters. Regardless of what the complication is, this can be seen as another threshold. However, even though there is uncertainty, unknowns, and apprehension, it's different now because the hero is different. They're more capable, and they're looking through the eyes of experience. They now possess a higher level of understanding about what must be done in order to keep moving forward. This is the time of last-minute setbacks, suppressed fears resurfacing, support structure abandonment, isolation, and final preparation. The hero knows the big battle is next. Step 8, the ordeal. This is the critical moment in the hero's journey in which there's often a battle with a monster, a wizard, a robot, obstacle, or warrior. And this battle facilitates the particular resolution of the adventure. This is where the hero will surely suffer. He'll be bludgeoned physically, mentally, spiritually, or a combination of all of the aforementioned. Usually, there will be some point where defeat seems inevitable, but the hero continues to battle even though he knows all is lost. But the hero continues to attack, knowing he cannot survive. But the hero continues to fight, knowing he will not win and the mission will fail. But because he continued to fight, timely reinforcements arrive, or the monster's power begins to wane, or he taps into a strength or a power he didn't possess before and didn't even know he had. The battle has awakened something within him. This is like when Goku was fighting Frieza and was utterly defeated. But he kept battling, and through the combined transformational catalyst of the ordeal and his total commitment to the fight, he was able to trigger his first Super Saiyan transformation. Step 9. The reward. Having won the battle, defeated the monster, survived the storm, or solved the riddle, the hero can now claim the prize. It may be a weapon, potion, book, amulet, or some other physical thing. But it may also be non-physical as well. An ability, knowledge, the affection of a love interest, or simply the peace of mind of knowing the monster has been vanquished. Oftentimes, the reward is not just one thing, but a collection of things. And sometimes the reward is not immediately realized, but will slowly manifest itself over time, or lay completely dormant until the time is ripe for its power to be invoked. However, it's important to note that just because the hero has captured the reward, that the journey and the battle isn't over. If anything, this may just be the start of a greater battle, or the true battle. The hero is now at full strength, having defeated his adversary in the ordeal and having obtained the prize of the reward. But this also means there may not be any more level ups available for any new challenges that emerge. Step 10. The road back. The hero is typically not yet safe on the road back. Although victorious during the ordeal, there are usually ramifications for doing so. The big boss may have loyalists who continue to fight. The monster's offspring are now enraged. The survived storm causes earthquakes, or the scientist's killer robot is now out for blood. Conversely, if completing the trial was proof of worthiness in the story, the hero may be given the elixir willingly, or the defeated monster now becomes an ally. Often the road back is its own mini-adventure and can be used as a device to allow the hero to use his newly acquired powers, skills, or weapon. This step can also be used to lay the foundation of the setup for the next adventure or outright be the setup for the next adventure. Whether more is written or not, giving the reader the inference that things will live on after the story ends is a powerful technique. Step 11. The resurrection. The hero disembarks from the adventure, but not the journey, by crossing the threshold for the second time. And the return can be just as traumatic as the initial crossing of the threshold. The hero may prefer their new situation, and returning to where they started is just as distasteful as the original embarkment was, but for different reasons. This reluctance to return mirrors the original apprehension to embark. Here he may wake up as if from a dream, emerge from a portal, or be placed back into his own world at the precise moment he originally left it. If the hero died in his conflict with the monster, this is where his resurrection will most often take place. In this case, his ultimate power is bestowed upon him post-resurrection. If we analyze Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings and restrict the story to just his character's arc, he confronted the boss-level monster, slayed it, died in the ordeal, but came back more powerful than ever. Step 12. Return with the elixir. The hero is able to fully realize his objective. Because the classic hero isn't defined by what he does for himself, but what he does for others, the hero returns in order to give others the benefit of the reward. This may be a physical, spiritual, or intellectual thing. The hero may also benefit by having an elevated social status or some other gift, but more often than not, his deeds are completely unknown to others except for a few. Either way, others will benefit from what he's gone through and what he's come back with. This stage is also where correction, reset, or redemptive conclusion takes place. This redemption may be personal to the hero or meaningful to the community at large. As this is the final step of the journey, The story may end at this stage, or any setup that was started during the road back or the resurrection may be invoked, triggering the beginning for yet another adventure. However, it's important that, regardless of which method is chosen, that the story has a solid ending. The circle must be closed. Most, if not all, subplots should be resolved. Intentional questions should be answered, and outstanding issues should be addressed. New elements can be created, but the old elements not germane to the telling of the continued journey should be dealt with here. However, purposeful deviations can be used to great effect as well. In Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, the audience was never told what was in the case, and us not knowing resulted in an avalanche of speculation surrounding the identity and purpose of what was inside that case and its golden glow. To wrap up, I submit that there are 3 ascending essentials in the hero's journey, with each being more important than the next. First, there's the prize. It's important because it provides the catalyst and the reason for all the action that takes place. Second, and more important in the hero's journey than any single action, is the adventure itself. The collective actions, activity, and story that enthrall, teach, instruct, and inspire provide the fundamental anchors to the moments. And finally, third, in the monomyth, more important than the prize, more important than the adventure, is the internal growth of the hero, the experience gained, lessons learned, and the knowledge that can now be shared. The hero now has something that he can give back to his family, village, country, planet, or shared existence. And if it was a good story, well executed, with something worthwhile to say said well, and we were paying attention, we too now have something that we can give back. Good luck on your next hero's journey. Thanks for watching.